Welcome to Homicide Life on the Set, a podcast about the Emmy Award-winning television show Homicide Life on the Street, with myself, Chris Carr, and Susan Ingram. On today's podcast, we're joined by Daniel Baldwin, who played Detective Beau Felton. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the podcast. So today we have Daniel Baldwin, who played Detective Beau Felton, and this is quite it's a jam-packed and very personal interview from sort of Daniel's point of view, and it's really enjoyable to record. But before we get into that, Susan, how are you?
Yeah, good. Hi, Chris. Hi, everybody. And I just want to, I know I effusively thanked him on the episode, but I want to thank him again for coming on and being so incredibly candid and also incredibly energetic. So I think people just like grab your coffee or your energy drink, sit back and enjoy this because it is an absolute ride. Yeah. It is a fun interview. And he was just, like you said, really personal, really personal. And I think that really makes it entertaining, but also meaningful.
Yeah, definitely. I think his enthusiasm is on par with our interview with Reed Diamond.
Yes.
I think it's a competition between the two now of which one was the most enthusiastic. But we'll let you decide.
Maybe we'll have them on together. That would be, we could just turn the mics off and let them go at it, right?
The Homicide round table. Yeah,
fun.
We should do that. That'd be good.
But Danny was just terrific and really, really a pleasure.
Excellent. One minor note. So Daniel, a bit in the interview, talks about Hill Street Blues, but I realized he made a mistake. It's actually NYPD Blue he's referring to, because NYPD Blue came out after Homicide, and as he was saying, they were trying to attempt the Homicide look by having a loose tripod rather than the actual proper handheld approach that Homicide used. So that will come up. So when you hear Hill Street Blues, think NYPD Blue.
Yeah.
But apart from that, it's a really exciting interview, and I hope you enjoy it.
I think everybody will really get a kick out of it.
They will indeed. Well, we'll catch you on the other side. Thank you for listening. Today we have the legendary Daniel Baldwin. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. What a pleasure.
Oh, it's great to have one of the OGs, you know.
Yes. We've been trying so hard to get all the original actors from starting from season one. So thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. My wife is considerably younger than me, so she didn't have the pleasure of watching Homicide when it came up. So, of course, I've been educating her. And as she starts to watch, and significantly, my wife is an African-American attorney in Atlanta. So in watching cutting-edge television in the 1990s, where I think one of the things that really differentiated us from previous television was the positive depiction of African Americans on a TV series. It was done very differently. It wasn't two bad guys who committed a crime, whatever. The chess players against criminals were black and white evenly on the show.
Absolutely.
And that was something very, very different that had not been done before and brought a lot of attention to the show. So in showing it to my wife, who then goes, okay, who's that? And I saw a picture the other day. I went, I'm the only one still alive in that picture.
Exactly.
Oh, wow.
And
Exactly.
that's a real harsh reality check. Yaphet was in the picture. Yaphet's gone. Ned is gone. Andre, who I thought he was going to be around to talk to for the rest of my life, is gone. And Belzer was gone. It was us five. Clark and Melissa weren't in and John Polito. And John Polito's gone. So, I mean, it's really me, Clark, Melissa. That's it.
Yes, and we have to, and Kyle. And we have
Oh, and
to.
Kyle, good.
We're still trying to get Hello Clark. We're still trying to get
Still
Clark.
trying to get him on.
We'll put another plug in. Hello Clark. We still want you to come on.
Where is Clark Johnson that he's not on this show? That's terrible. I'll call him for you.
Good.
Please.
Thank you.
Please do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
He's being coy. We're not quite sure why. But I don't know if you know, we started the podcast because Chris was developing a cop show in London. He's in London. And he was trying to find somebody to talk to about how we made the show, how the show was shot. And so he emailed me, and we got on a Zoom. And at the end of the Zoom, he said, "This would make a great podcast." And so we started this, and it actually has been such a joy to reconnect with everybody. It's just been really great. So once again, another joyful morning, talking to you and reconnecting with somebody.
Well, then, being that you frame it in that framework, let me give you, which I think that my being on the show, you will hear multiple things you did not know. So, for instance, do you know how Homicide: Life on the Streets was shot, the pilot?
You know, interesting, because I started on the second season when Jean started. So I didn't work on the season with Wayne Ewing. So go
Right.
ahead.
So, I don't believe any of the other actors besides Clark Johnson will be able to tell you the story. But the answer is, unlike any time ever in network television history, there was no pilot. I got a call. I had already auditioned for the show. Barry Levinson is shooting a movie with Robin Williams called Toys. And they would like you to show up at lunchtime on the set of Toys, where they're going to experiment with this French cameraman named Wayne Ewing. And they're going to shoot your audition, your final audition, paper in hand. And you're going to walk around, they're going to shoot it so they can show the network how they intend, because they can't explain it. They can't put it into words. No, it really jiggles. We're not going to put it on a tripod. We're going to roll it on a wheelchair. So there's Wayne. There's Robin, who I know and is killing me. I'm nervous. I'm reading for Levinson. This is my final. This is the pilot. So this is what they're going to show the network. They're not going to cut together a cut version of this. They're going to take this audition footage, cut a little bit of it up, and show the network. And they did, and sold the show based on this audition. Now, Clark, it was the famous scene in the first episode where Andre Brower can't find the Cavalier, the keys to the Cavalier.
Great scene. Great scene.
And of course, now we're doing this metaphor to one looks like the other. It's a black-white thing between me and Andre, which was a very controversial time for me on the show, the first episode. And I'll tell that story after this. Anyway, here's Robin comes up to me and he's doing impressions of a black guy, like how he thinks he would read it with me. He's getting ready to. I go, Jesus Christ, stop! I got to get ready for this. And he's making jokes. And here comes Clark, who I don't know. And I always envisioned when I got it, I was going to be doing this with Clark would be Pemberton. They switched his role. They gave it to Andre. It was so crazy and frenetic how we shot this. And then later on, I found out that's what they sold the network on to sell the whole show, that audition.
Ah, that scene, really. That's such a good scene.
Yeah. It's a great scene, but I'll tell you my difficulty with, for me, I always had a very tenuous relationship with Fontana and some of those guys on the show. And I think we both, had we been older and known a little bit better and not been so brash and everything. I mean, certainly I was. And Tom didn't like me very much. He just didn't like me. So, and there were things I did that he didn't understand. Like he came to me one day and he goes, "Is it true that you don't read the whole script?" And I went, "Not until it breaks continuity for time." And he goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, if it starts out with me and Melissa and that's the beginning of the episode, if it jumps to later in the episode, I read the episode. If it doesn't, it stays. I don't want to know what happens." I said, "It affects how I play the scene. So if I know later on I'm going to end up kissing Melissa or I'm going to end up killing the guy, it's going to change what I might do before that. Do you not understand that? So if it's in chronological order, which a lot of times on Homicide we shot that way, I don't want to break that. I don't want to break the reality of it for me as the reader and the actor." He could not understand that. He was so pissed at me that I didn't read his words like they were, falling off the tablets or whatever it was that it was supposed to be. And,
so did you read your scenes only, or did you read them right before
I didn't read anything.
we shot?
I opened it up that morning. As soon as it broke continuity, I read, and then I read the whole episode. But I'd say over half the time I didn't have to do that. He was furious that I didn't, tell him, because you couldn't change a word on the show anyway. They didn't like you changing the words. So if it was, so we'll have dinner at 3:00 and then we can go out. And I said, well, let's just go out and we'll have dinner at 3:00. Whatever. They go, hold. Daniel, could you read it the way it's written? And so you didn't have a lot of license. And the show was written that well that you needed to respect that. There was a cadence and what they wanted for your character. But, they did things. Alec asked me, I should do an episode with you. And I know Tom hates the story. That's why I'm going to tell it.
We already had Tom on, so good. So.
Okay, well, he won't tell you these things because these would be the things
he was on already last year, so.
Yeah, well, this would make you understand the kind of stuff that we had to go through as actors with him and Jimmy sometimes. Not Jimmy as much, but definitely with Tom. There was a gang that all were his buddies. And I remember when Isabella got on the show, she said, well, they're having a big dinner. And I said, yeah, I'm not going to that dinner. And she said, well, everyone in the cast is going. You'd be the only one. I said, then I'll be the only one not to go. I said, look, I'm not getting paid to go to dinners. I'm not getting, and I go, and I don't need to sit there and hear Ned talk about how he's going to kill Yaphet or whatever's going to happen. I mean, they had wars, those people. And so I just kept it so that when I walked on set, I could go, hey, and everyone said hi to me. I had my problems, don't get me wrong, which I'll get into, drug addiction and stuff that went on for me while I was on that show. But Tom turned around and said, I said to Tom, Alec wants to be on the show. Now, at the time, we're having Rob, and Alec's a pretty big actor at the time. So I think it's good for the show to have him and two brothers. And he agrees. They write the episode. They send me the episode. The entire episode is Alec and Andre. The conflict is with Andre. So Alec reads the episode and goes, who's Pembleton? I thought you were Felton. And I said, I am Felton. He goes, well, the whole episode, have you read it? I said, I haven't read it yet. So I go and I read it. I go back to Tom and I go, Tom, why would Alec come on the show to do an episode with Andre Brower when the reason why he's doing it is, and so Alec gets on the phone with Tom and goes, no offense, I don't need a job on network television right now. I'm shooting Hunt for Red October and things are going well. And
wow, yeah.
I'd like you to switch the characters to be Felton becomes Pembleton in this episode. Let's have this conflict with me and my brother. And he went, yeah, no, that's not how we wrote it. This is what we're going to do. So Alec declined. 2 episodes later, Richard Belzer has the line, it's like the movie The Getaway. Did you ever see that? And the guy looks at Belzer and Belzer goes, no, did anybody? So he writes in personally that Alec's movie sucked. And I thought, so of course I go back to him, I go, why would you write that? Why would you say that my brother's movie isn't good? I'm like, what the fuck is wrong with you, man? Like, but we had this kind of thing that went back and forth. On that first episode, let me get back to this because I know I'm straying out. I say to him, he says, yeah, that's right, Felton. One car looks just like, that's the way it is for you. They all look alike. And I said, with the way you dress, who even knows you're black? Now, that's a cutting line. That's implying that because he dresses sharply, he couldn't be African-American. I had a problem with that line. And I learned as a director, one of the greatest acting lessons I ever learned from a directorial standpoint from Barry Levinson. He looked at me and he went, all right, we got that one. Because now me and Andre are puffing each other's chests up and we're going at it with each other. And he said, what can we do that's different? And I looked at him and I said, well, what if my physical proximity got closer to him? He goes, okay, that's a possibility. Andre went, well, what if I raised the volume up? Each thing got more confrontational. And he went, okay, all right, we could try that. Anything else? And I said, what if I just threw it away like it's a joke? He went, try that. And pointed right at my face, try that. Now he knew all along and that's what he wanted. But he knew that by taking me to the water and leading me to it was better for me to decide what to drink and how to drink it than to tell me how to drink it. Because it wouldn't have come from inside had I not found it with him. And so then I went out and I said, with the way you dress, who even knows you're black? Like I kind of just threw it out there. But it was a dangerous line. Fontana and some of the writers didn't realize. You see Carol O'Connor playing Archie Bunker, and that's still someone who's a racist. I'm lending my name to a character who has racial tendencies. That's a dangerous thing. You got to be careful with how you do that. And I was concerned. They didn't give a shit about that. They didn't care what was at your expense, whether you were gay, whether you were this, whether that. They did not care. It was their writing, and they didn't want to hear our notes about it. So that was challenging for me with the writers that they would never.
But
really
the thing that was so great about that scene and many other scenes with you and Andre, and also with many of the other actors where race becomes a big discussion, was
Right.
that show had people saying stuff that people don't say out loud. So the discussion about, let's call it Fremont Street or let's call it MLK Boulevard, all those things were so nuts on about the what things that people want to say they can't say. And Peter Garrity, we just interviewed him recently. His episode was on this week. Also, his character also had, there were a lot of racial discussions with his character, but the thing that I loved about the show was that your character and his character, and when all those discussions happened, you still remained sympathetic. There was a tone and the way that that stuff was written that you could go, yeah, I totally get what he's saying, and not think that you're a racist, and not think that you've gone over the edge, that you're a human being that has these thoughts and ideas, and they actually get said on that show.
Mm.
And so the way they did that, because your character was incredibly complex and also very sympathetic, even after all the harsh stuff that went back and forth with everybody.
Yeah, I remember there was a great scene, the story I got from Robin was they actually asked him who he wanted to be confrontational with, and he said me because we had a relationship previous to the show. And so there's a great scene when I'm sitting there and I say, "Why is it every witness comes in and all they can remember is a barrel the size of the Fort McHenry tunnel and two yos?" Well, and I call them yos. And again, that wasn't a racist comment. That's a persona as a detective. You know, that's two black guys on the corner in this area. We're dealing with an area that's predominantly African American and high in crime. Now, whether you want to get into the socioeconomics of why that exists, that has nothing to do with what's the facts of the show. Um, and so I remember getting people don't realize if they ever took the out footage of that scene, the first take where Robin comes up behind me. We can curse on your show?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because Robin comes up behind me and I go, yeah, and the witness said, I'm gonna make more overtime, but and he goes, I want this guy off the case. I want this motherfucker back. He starts screaming at me. And he's yelling, blow me, yelling all this shit in the background of the scene while the camera's still on me. And I'm looking at him going, you're a guest on my show. Now it's gotten into personal. It's not even about the scene anymore. You're a guest on my show, motherfucker. You're not gonna fucking talk. And we're going at it. Like I thought it was gonna come to blows, and I was gonna knock Robin Williams out. I really did. And so they come, of course, they grab me. They pull me back like I'm the monster. And I went, no, he's a fucking guest on my show in my house. He's not going to come fucking talk to me like that. And I go, you're the fucking one that watched your wife like it was real. I went, you're the one that watched your wife get shot in the fucking face and did shit about it, you fucking pussy. I'm screaming at him. I mean, they had to separate us.
What a
Now we
great way
come
to
back
get
and we try
ramped
to,
up
and we
for the
try to,
scene. Yeah.
oh my God, it was great. So that night, I'm in, I'm in that little shitty hotel on Fremont that we stayed at all the time, and he calls me, Robin. Hey, we're going to dinner. Um, yeah, I want you to come. And I said, you know what, bro? That was gold today. I said, I don't want to fuck with that. I don't want to mess with that. I'm like, I want to keep that energy. I want to keep that. I go, I love you, but no, I'm not going. You go with Kyle and all the rest of them and do your thing. I said, but I'll see you tomorrow at work. And I hung up. That was it. And I
So
talked
you
to him.
could keep that energy the next
Yeah,
time you were in a
man, that was
scene. Right.
there was fucking heat. Listen, Melissa Leo, I knew Melissa. She was on a series with my brother Steven before him, The Young Riders. And
Oh,
I
sure.
loved Melissa. I respected her work but I will never forget like that girl when she wanted to turn it on when there was a scene where, and this is maybe one of the few times as an actor, as a director, I've done this a number of times quietly. I never direct in front of other people. I always pull the actor aside. I don't want to embarrass them. And I like to learn that Levinson lesson where I help them find it with me. But Melissa said to me, something was, and I'm going to paraphrase, but it was something about did I think she was sexy or did I think, and she goes, well, don't you think and she like was kind of brash with me. And I said, can we cut for a sec? And then the director looked at it and said, yeah. I go, can I talk to you for a second? And we walked outside and lit up a cigarette together. I went, can we take one opportunity for this audience to see that we care about each other and we like each other? Could we do that? Try it. And she looked at me. She went, I go, doesn't it matter to you as a woman, as your partner? Am I so, grotesque or whatever it is that you think of me? Forget Daniel Baldwin, but as Beau Felton, don't you care as a woman that whether I thought you were attractive or don't you care that people know that I care about you? I said, can you give me one opportunity to play off of some kind of version of you're actually concerned if I think whether or not you're attractive. And she went, okay, let's go try it. She turned it on. I almost lost that I was in the scene.
It's a good
I had to
scene.
remember because she went, you like, she got all coy and she looked away and she went, you don't think I'm sexy, Beau? Like, you don't think I'm attractive? And I was like, yes, yes. That's what the show was about, guys. The show was about the relationships, the amazing relationship. The episode where I'm quitting smoking with Andre. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant episode. The writing in that show was so amazing. It was so amazing. I wish that the experience could have been different for me. I really
And I
do.
want to go back to I don't mean to cut you off, but I want to go back to Bop Gun and that scene with Robin Williams,
Yeah,
where you say, "Man, we're going to rack up some overtime," and
yeah,
Robin Williams goes ape
yeah.
shit. We had David Simon on, and David said that scene in particular was one of the most realistic moments in the show because it bald face showed, you know, not just that the detectives have to keep their emotions out of it, but that also that, you're joking about this horrible thing that just happened, but
Sure.
that does not and did not affect the fact that you guys would work your asses off to find out who killed his wife, which is what G basically comes in and says. He grabs him and takes him in his office and says, look, those guys, if I want anybody on this case, I want Beau Felton on the case because he's going to find out who killed your wife.
It's
So
the oil on
I
it's the
love that
oil
he
on
said that was one of the most realistic things in the show, having lived with detectives, with the homicide
what a
detectives.
high compliment to get from the writer of the show, really.
Yeah,
I mean, it was his work, David. I briefly every once in a while, we're so different politically. I jab at him every once in a while on something on social media, but
sure.
I stay out of his way. He
Oh,
and
you
I
don't
are
want to
very
jab at him. He jabs back pretty
oh my
hard.
God, yeah, he's got a pitchfork. But what they call that, I refer to that as the oil on the wing. So what makes it so that a duck can turn around and swim like that? They have a special oil on their wing that repels that water that it comes down. That's what allows a homicide detective to go on to the 10th, the 12th, the 20th, the 200th, the 500th case. You have to be able to insulate yourself from how much that would just grind at you. And when you look at the divorce rate, the suicide rate, the complications that can come from a career in your livelihood, certainly detectives and homicide detectives in particular are one of the highest as far as incidents
Sure.
are concerned because of just how devastating it is to deal with that level of horror and death every day. But that is that oil to be able to look at it and actually joke about it. Of course, I don't mean anything jokingly about the horrible death of Robin Williams' wife on the show, his character, but that's how you get through it. You
Yeah.
can actually joke about it.
Yeah, it's interesting, and I became a newspaper reporter after I worked on Homicide, and the day 9/11 happened and the towers fell, I was out going to the police precincts to pick up the police reports so I could put them in the newspaper, and I went to a local police precinct, and as the towers were falling, the cops were joking about it. And I remember it just sort of blew my mind, like, how
Wow.
can you joke about that? But then you realize it's because the horror that they see every day and
Yeah.
what they deal with every day, that, like you said, that's the oil on their wings. I love that expression.
Yeah.
I would love to go back to, because I heard I listened to the beginning of one of your shows the other day. Somebody asked you what it was like growing up in Long Island. But could you go back and talk about how, obviously you come from, a bunch of brothers that are actors. I have no idea how you got into the business, how you became you want to talk a little bit
Yeah, what
about,
inspired
Yeah.
you? Yeah.
yeah, where
Yeah.
that
So
came
in
from?
1966, I was 6, Alec was 8.5, and my father was a high school football coach in Massapequa on Long Island. So we went to Burner High School. My father coached and taught at Massapequa High School. They were our arch rivals. We played them Thanksgiving Day for bragging rights for the whole town. We had to play my father.
I love
So
it.
at the
That's great.
time, my father asked the district for an 8 millimeter camera to go film the team they're playing the next week. He wants to scout the team, and they said no. So he bought the camera himself. In 66, we had hour-long high school football black and white movies on a drawstring screen in our backyard. My mother made brownies and cupcakes, and the whole neighborhood came and watched silent black and white high school football movies. And it was the Baldwins are having movies, let's go. And we all went and watched the movies at my yard.
So were they were black and whites of the games?
My dad would film the team they were going to play the next week. So neither team
Okay.
was even Massapequa High School. It was a scouting film.
Gotcha.
But it was a
Wow.
movie in our backyard. We had a movie in our
hear ya, I
backyard, for
hear
Christ's
ya.
sake. This is 1966.
I hear you.
This is like, this is like XTS, like this is surround sound. This is, innovative stuff that just didn't happen. So with the projector playing reel to reel. So we asked my dad in 67, can we use the camera? And he said 3 rules. The camera never leaves the property. If you break the camera, you have to fix the camera. And I'm not financing your film endeavors. You will raise the money yourself to buy film and make your own movies. Now, Alec and I, even at the time with the Cornelius brothers, understood editing at the can. So movie would open with Alec sitting on a telephone book, driving my mother's Studebaker down the driveway. And he would be sitting, and he'd have his Harris tweed jacket and bow tie on, and he looked into the camera. Car rolled by. The car would sit in the middle of the street because we couldn't push it back up the hill. And he'd get out, and we'd have him walking towards the back door, and then cut. Then he would take the camera, and I'd be up in the tree over the pool aiming the gun, and we'd cut. So we edited in the can an actual sequence. So we made 20 or so hour-long movies called Joe Cool movies, which was a spoof on Sean Connery's James Bond. Alec played Joe.
Hour-long. Holy crap.
Yeah, hour-long movies. So,
Wow.
and he killed me in all my mother's wigs and different. We had ketchup, and there's a great scene where I'm in the tree. I cut to him, and he pulls his gun out and shoots. Then he takes the camera and comes running up, and you see the ground and the side of the pool because he didn't hold the camera steady. And then he gets me, and I fall into the pool, and I had a handful of ketchup, and the ketchup starts coming out from around my body, and I'm floating in the pool, but I couldn't hold my breath long enough, so I go. And I go back into the water. It's classic. It's classic. So we made movies as kids. We knew that it was something that we wanted to do. My father asked us, please go to college first and have something to fall back on because the odds of you making it in a film career, I'd rather have you have something stable. So we did that. Alec, of course, led everybody off. He went first. And then the rest of the boys followed place with something that we had fun. Alec and I acted in high school, Steven a little bit, then Billy just modeled for a while. But yeah, I think we fooled him pretty well for a pretty long time.
That's great. And
Yeah.
so the first connection to Homicide, well, do you already knew Barry and Tom to be able to get on the toy set to do
No. I never
Okay.
heard of Tom. I knew who Barry was.
So you had
From
already
Diner.
auditioned for Homicide
I
while
read
they
for Lou
shot the.
DeGimo, the casting director.
Okay.
Lou called me back and said through my agent, Barry wants you up there, and that was it. I went in a second time, read for Barry with Robin there, with Clark Johnson, and I was on the show. Yeah. Yeah, no, I didn't know anybody. So I'd heard of Levinson, of course.
So obviously you got the job in Homicide now in Baltimore. Did you spend any time with the real detectives from the book or even just from the Baltimore City Police before you started?
I was the only one. That was the only one.
Can you talk to us about that? Yeah.
Yeah, they asked us, did you want to come and go, on and see some investigation stuff? I hooked up with a cop there named Jimmy Grace. Jimmy would come pick me up at 1:00 in the morning at my apartment, which was down in Fells Point. And he would take me, right there. I mean, the guys were alive. I went in and saw people. I saw, Edgerton and some of the other guys that were the actual cops, whose names were changed for the book. I met them all. I was there for 6 weeks before we shot. I was the only detective on the show that went, and I had quite a bit of extensive training with those guys. Because listen, there's a different way they do it in different towns. If you're going to depict it in Baltimore, the ultimate compliment is to have a Baltimore detective say, yeah, that's how they do it. To hear David Simon say, that scene that I saw was exactly what I mean, that's the name of the game, because you're depicting something that the little nuances and cadences that are different to be Philly, New York, or whatever, are imperative if you're going to accurately depict a scene. So I wanted to make sure I was a Baltimore homicide detective.
Yeah, and I would say, I don't want to insult anybody, but I would say that your depiction was very, even though you got the Long Island accent a little bit, your depiction was very Baltimore. Your sort of boots on the ground. I'm just going to keep going until I get this done. It was very, very sort of hometowny depiction. And obviously, you had the wife and the kids and the house on the east side, and their jokes about Dundalk and Essex and everything from the area you came from. So, was there anything that you could draw from in addition to hanging out with the cops? Was there anything, except maybe from your own background, you drew from to get that sort of hometown,
Sure.
literally Billy Boy,
I'll tell you a great story. So
characterization?
Melissa's desk was across from mine, and the other guys were over here, and they're all doing, "Can I have a picture of the woman that you think's gonna play my wife? Can I have a picture?" I took a Mayflower truck, I put it on a clock radio, I turned it sideways with the truck crashing off the top of the thing with the Baltimore Colts label on it. Why? Because in the middle of the night, the
Yes,
Baltimore Colts moved out to Indianapolis, and it
we
was the
know that
Mayflower
story.
trucks that moved them out. And I wanted
Ah.
people, if you were that accurate and you looked at, I was a
People
good
would
old
get
boy
it.
from Billytown. The Mayflower, fuck them. They stole my team. And Ursay moved our guys to Indianapolis. And there went my football team that I watched as a kid. So even on my desk, there was tiny little hints at who that character was. Yeah, no, I played it all.
That's great. Yeah, I think I mentioned this a little earlier. Your character, and everybody's character was, but your character was very conflicted and sometimes harsh. But like I said, always played with humanity that left Beau with something that viewers could empathize with. Can you talk about having that's a lot to juggle. It's a one thing to play a one-dimensional character, but
Yeah.
to have to play somebody that has all those, I use this term a lot in the show, all these layers. How do you do that? How do you do that and still be so real and a sympathetic character in the middle of all
Well,
that?
I tried to draw from my life experiences. So
Mm.
let me tell you, there's a lot of complexity, stuff I don't know if you know or if you remember through the rumor mill about things that went on the show for me personally. First of all, I'm a recovering drug addict, an alcoholic. So that I think definitely wasn't a secret on the show. I think people knew that I was in recovery. Um, there was an incident that, to this day is one of probably the most horrific things that ever happened to me on a set. And that was, I don't know if you know the story about Jim Finity and me.
Don't know. So there were
Yeah.
things that happened that I didn't know that happened, on this.
So I'm coming in to go get my mail in season two. Um, and or no, season three. And Finity and I, he's a tough guy. I got along with Jim. He knew
Mm.
what time it was. He was the UPM. He was in the waterfront across the street early in the morning, and he had been drinking. And he came up behind me with a 38 snub nose and clicked it, put it to the back of my head, and told me, I've had it with you. I've had it with your stuff. Now I'm on the property we shoot the show on. I'm at the production office right there on the water in the Inner Harbor, and he has pulled the hammer back and pressed aggressively the gun to the back of my head. Hey guys, I'm a fucking actor working on an NBC TV series
Mhm.
and one of the lead actors of the show. Like, he's holding a live gun. If he had flinched, he'd have blown my brains out. So of course, I'm a little shaken by it and everything.
Mm.
Barely an apology, barely anything from, Jim. Hey, I had a couple too many. Barry Levinson called up and said, "Are you okay?" Fontana could have given a shit about it. And that really set me into a bad place. Not that I hadn't already had some problems with drugs and alcohol while I was on the show, as did other members of the cast that I found out later. But um, that was a big one for me, that shaped things about, I remember having a conversation with my brother Alec, and he said to me, "Do you really believe that anyone on that show cares about you?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I go, "I have friends on it." She goes, "No, you act like you're surprised that producers and people haven't called you. They don't care about you. It's just like an athletic team. You're a cog on that show. If you go down, they replace you with somebody else, and that's just the fucking way it is."
It's a
And I
big
remember how
machine.
naive I was because I thought they did care about me. I really did. I thought I was part of their family, and I thought I was one of these guys. That's why I didn't knock people out a couple of times when I had every right to turn around and punch Jim Finity right in the face. And I had, and Tom Fontana for his big mouth, because he never would have said to me what things he said to me if he wasn't the executive producer of that show and had the power to fire me. So they took advantage of their position sometimes, but that's okay. I think they would look at what happened now and say, gosh, I wish I could have changed a few things too. I think that we all grow and we mature, in different ways. But there were things they did on the show that I can't still today tell you whether or not they were brilliant or they took advantage of life. And let me explain. So I went through a divorce on the show, a real life divorce. My ex, who I have a daughter with, left me while I was on the show. And there was the story that I told Andre and one other person. I don't think it was Andre that repeated it, so the other person must have repeated it. And it was that I came home from work and the whole house was empty. Everything of mine was taken out of the house, except my clothes were left in the garage
Wow.
in a pile next to my motorcycle. Every spoon, every fork, every piece of furniture, every piece of clothes except my clothes and my daughter were taken from the house. Now, 3 episodes later, that scene is written into the show.
Wow. Yeah.
And I thought, so when I walked through it, I read it, and I walked through it, I thought, wow, this is gonna be really emotional for me, There was, I remember Clark Johnson. It was awful what they did to him. Um, there was the sex crimes, detective. Remember that episode? They br
Yes.
they they brought her in from LA. She was a sex crimes detective, African American, very pretty girl. I can't think of her name. Did you know that was Clark Johnson's fiancée in real life before he was getting married?
No, I
So
don't think I
they
do
went
that.
all the way to we went to DC and New York to
Wow.
hire the guest stars. They went all the way to LA the week of Clark Johnson going to Jamaica's wedding. He's getting remarried. They hired the girl that's the sex crimes detective, is his former fiance, put her in the week before he's going to get married and have him have to act with her in front of the wife that he's about to go marry. And I'm thinking, there wasn't some other girl you could have hired.
Wow,
You
interesting.
need, but they did shit like that you guys in the crew didn't know they were doing to us.
But
They did all kinds of weird.
yeah, a number of the guests have said that they borrowed from their real lives and the stuff ended up in scripts. So, yeah,
Yeah,
interesting. And
yeah,
those particular stories I didn't know. But it's interesting what you said about about Alex saying, they don't care about you because as a freelancer in my whole career, and I don't mean this just in Homicide, but if my freelance brethren and sisterin, we all considered ourselves, we were considered warm bodies. And that if you got run over on the show or the next day or, whatever, there'd be another body in your, there wouldn't be any grieving. There'd be another body in your
right.
place the next day as a freelancer. It never occurred to me that actors also felt that way.
Well, and so I'm in Toronto shooting a movie, and Fontana calls and says, I want to come up. I was up with Isabella. And he said, do you mind? I'm going to be up there. I want to see you. And he comes and he goes, I don't know if we're going to ask you back, on the show or not. And I looked at him, I said, why would you do that? And he said, well, you know, I understand you don't like the direction that the script is going in. They said they were going to have me start drinking again. I went, listen, make my character gay. Make my character something, make me something different that I'm growing and I'm changing, I'm evolving. Don't make me go back and I'm back in the waterfront drinking. I'm like, we've done that already. I'm an alcoholic. We got it. He got sober. Make me a suspect in a crime. Kill me then, if you want. I don't want to go back. And they said, well, then if you're not willing to do that, then we will kill you if that's what you want. And I went,
Mm,
I didn't say that. I said I'd like to do the show, and they wanted me off the show, but I'm all for continuing to expand. I hate the repetition unless it's a sitcom and that's your character. You know what I mean? And you're trying to hammer across a point by making him a racist all the time, so you can point out racial difficulties through this character. Like I get that, but if you're not going to teach me something and help me to grow, then it's just stagnant to me.
right.
It
But
is.
your character did, even with all that, have the arc of like having the marital problems, having an affair, and then getting back together with your wife and get into that scene with you going home and your kids jumping on you was so wonderful and powerful. So there was that at least that much of an arc, and I hear what you're saying about the rest of it, but there was definitely some growth, I think, in your character.
I do. I saw the journey. I think that like a sexual experience. There's the foreplay, the climax, and then the resolution. I never felt like we really resoluted it, nor did I think we had gone as far as we could have. There was a lot of, there was a great episode where I had a big conflict. Um, I remember I had to go to his hotel room, Wilford Brimley. Remember Wilford?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Grumpy
Wilford, that was me.
William Wilford.
Yeah, that was me and Clark Johnson in the bathroom because
Yes.
Yeah.
Wilford's
Brilliant
son
scene.
was my friend and he thought I was covering up something. But with Wilford, he was an asshole the first day on set, like really bad. So I went to his hotel, I knocked on his door, and he came to the door. He said, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "Hey, man, you're a guest on our show. Be a nice guest. Would you go in someone's house and act the way you acted today?"
Did
And
you
he looked
really
at me.
do that? Really?
Oh, I,
Wow.
oh, I
Because
did.
he was not happy. He was a grumpy
No,
son.
but he got better after I talked to him. So he said, because he had off the next day and then he worked in it. And I said, I'm just asking to look at it. I know you've been doing this a long time. I have great respect for you. I'm so excited to work with you because I think you're legendary and you're acting. But I'm just asking you, today you made it a lot harder on set than it needed to be. I said, and I just would ask you, would you do that if you came over my house as a guest? Because you're in my house as a guest right now. This is where I live. You're just coming in. I got to be here all the time. I'm just asking you, maybe you never looked at it like that before, but you might want to. He went, fair enough. He said, that's exactly what he went, fair enough. And he shut his door. I never invited me in, left. And he changed when he got to work the next day, next
Interesting.
time.
So
He
that
did.
that was in See No Evil, which Chris and I have both watched recently. And
Great episode.
talk about, and Chris, you jump in too, but can you talk about that scene, basically where you had just gone in and talked to your friend about how to parry against, the interrogation, and Lewis comes into the bathroom, and I think Chris, you said it was all shot in one take. Is that what you
It looked like
recall?
it was all one take, this
All
sort
one
of
take.
conflict in the bathroom. Yeah.
How
Amazing.
did you prepare for that? I mean, that is an intense. I mean, it looks like you guys are really fighting.
Yeah, we went at it. Me and Clark got wound up for that.
And how did you do that?
If you ask him, I wonder if he remembers this. We walked by each other and we kind of both knew, so we weren't as friendly. Hey, bro, what's up? We didn't do any of that. But I knew if I wound him up, it would be better because I'd watched him in other stuff that he'd done with Bells, and I don't think anyone was going to go as far. Like Andre and I would fuck with each other. We would fuck with each other. And I had more of that with Andre than I did with Clark. I didn't have a lot of work directly with Clark or Kyle. I never really worked with them. Um, I'll tell you a great story. I showed up for Kyle one time. But I went up to Clark and I walked by him and we're just about ready to go too. I mean, literally, okay, guys, 1 minute, and I walked up and went, do me a favor. Don't let me fucking own you in this, okay? Please show up. Please show up. And I walked away like I was going to beat his ass. And he went like this. What did you? I'm like, just show up, okay? Please don't let me dominate you. And I was
Great
like,
psychology. Wow.
right? And so he
Yeah.
fucking walked in there puffed up right at the gate, you know, but I told you fucking Beau. And he's got me like this one. I'm like, yes, come get it, baby. Come get it. But I, I'll take a little credit for it. I got him fired up. I think he was going to try to come in and do his Rico Suave thing. No, I wanted his ass. I wanted him on the line. And he delivered, man. He was hot in that scene.
He did. He fucking
Oh, it was
slammed you
brilliant.
around, man.
Brilliant
He slammed
scene.
you
Brilliant
around.
scene.
He
You
did. He
slammed
threw me
each
around,
other around.
and that's it. Listen, we played in a. I'll never forget. We played in a basketball. Now Clark will remember this. Kyle wasn't sure about it because I did Kyle's podcast with Reed, and I tell Reed, I go, Reed, I love you, bro. You're really good on the show, but you're on the second team. You're not on the All-Star team. You're not on the original cast.
How'd he
I had
take
to
that?
leave the show for it to be okay for you to come on, bro. You're not on the original cast. He got pissed. But we played in a basketball league. We found like an old man's YMC basketball league that
Really?
me, Clark, and Kyle played in the first year. And man, we were we thought we were so badass. We're out there playing with these inner city kids that were really good basketball players. But I would get in a fight almost every week in this league. I mean, I threw somebody on the ground or we did something that was crazy. But I did. I remember playing that basketball. I remember what would get Clark pissed from that moment playing basketball. I said to him, "You gonna let him do that to you? This kid is owning you right now, for Christ's sake. He's a fucking kid." And Clark would get all jacked up, while we played on the basketball team. But Kyle, I'll never forget this. I knew I knew what Robin was doing when he did that Fort McHenry tunnel scene with me. He was testing. He wanted to see who was going to stand up to him. That's part of who he was. That's how he was. That's who he was as a stand-up. He'd come in, he'd improv, he yelled stuff during your act. I mean, he didn't care. He messed with you as an improvisationalist. And Kyle had a scene, and I showed up for it because I wanted to watch what Robin was going to do. And it was before I did my scene with him. And they're on the rooftop, and I think he asked him for his gun. He said, "Let me see the gun. Can I just hold it?" And I turned around, and I remember they were walking through it and everything, and I walked up to him, I went, "Do not give him that gun. I don't give a fuck what it says in the scene. Do not give him that gun." And Kyle looked at me, he goes, "It's in the script." I said, "I don't give a fuck. I'm just telling you right now." So I don't care what the fuck Fontana wrote. I don't care what Jimmy Yoshimura wrote. If they told me as a Baltimore homicide detective to unclip my weapon and hand it to someone who's the spouse of someone who was killed, I would have said, "Fuck you. I am never handing." That would never happen, guys. That would never happen. Ever, 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 ever happen. So I went, "Do not." He wants to see if you're going to give him that fucking gun. And he's going to sweet talk you, even though it's in the script, because these idiots don't know a detective would never do that. And he gave him the gun, and I was like, "Oh my God, he owns you now. He
Mhm.
owns you. Like the episode's over for you now because you just did something that any homicide detective would look at and go, you gave him your gun to let him hold it? What the fuck show is that from? You never get." That's the kind of shit that when that would happen, I'd get in a conflict with them because they'd go, "We want you to give him the gun." And I'd go, "No, I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. Fine, write the scene for somebody else. I'm not doing that." Because that would never happen, guys. It would never happen.
Yeah, Melissa had a similar confrontation about her character always put her gun away before going into the squad room, and a director wanted to change that and didn't
Yeah,
like that.
I remember
Yeah.
I remember that showdown. She says, "No, I'm not taking my gun to my desk. Every time I come in, I put it in the locker." And there
Right.
was a long let's call it a discussion about that, and she was not gonna waver from that because that
No,
leaves you vulnerable, which is actually what happened, with the big shootout, toward the end of the show, where it was because somebody got somebody's gun that shouldn't have been able to get to it.
good for Melissa. That's
Yeah.
the way you do it.
Yeah, yeah. Daniel, I had a question about backtracking a bit. What was it like sort of on that first episode, Gone for Good, filming that? Because I've heard lots of rumors here and there about what that first episode was like, and I think there was allegedly a showdown between Tom and the actors or something because people didn't want to show up or something. Can you talk to us about that early episode and what your first few days on the show was like?
I had heard of Ned Beatty. And it's hard to talk outside of being yourself, but I'm going to try to do that. I heard of Ned Beatty. I knew Melissa. I did stand up and knew Richard Belzer. I
Mhm.
kind of knew from early James Bond a little bit of Yaphet Kotto. I never heard of Andre Brower. I never heard of Kyle Secor. Polito I saw in Miller's Crossing. I thought his work and that was good.
Oh,
But again,
right.
I didn't really
Oh.
know. I didn't know anybody really well at all, except for Melissa, who was on a show with my brother. Um, So I didn't know what to expect. I did know that I was doing a show that was getting a lot of attention and was going to probably air after the Super Bowl. I never heard of Fontana or any of those guys. I don't think anybody really heard of any of them either. This is what really kind of they cut their teeth on to get into the big time. Um, I knew it was a great opportunity to do writing that I had not really seen before. I went and being one of the 2 original cast members that saw what they meant when they said, "We're gonna shoot it like this," I was there. I
Mm.
shot that, I told you, audition, so I knew what that was gonna be like. So that was really I'm like, "We're really gonna shoot everything on his shoulder, everything we're gonna roll him, and he's gonna do" like, "No." I was like, "Wow, that's gonna look so funky and documentary and hard cuts," and I'm like, "Okay, man, well, I'm in." I knew I wasn't getting paid. They told everybody, "We're not paying you. We're gonna pay." I mean, they paid me some ridiculously low amount of money, but I was willing to do the investment because I believed in the show, and I believed that if we got to season 4, then we were going to go into a renegotiation, which is another
Mm.
reason why I was so resentful that they fucked me because it was at season 4 that they said, "Yeah, we're not sure if we're going to take you on." So I took it on the chin for 3 years for no money. And it was never Ned or Andre or all these great actors, it was always me that had to do The Tonight Show, that had to do Letterman, that had to do Good Morning America, because my last name was Baldwin, and I was more famous than some of the other people that originally were on the show. Or you didn't really want to put Ned Beatty on a talk show because you weren't sure what he was going to say. And I mean, that was a consideration. I love Ned. He was one of my good golfing friends, and we remained friends until he died. But they used me based on the last name stuff to go do the promotion, but they never paid me for it. So there was a lot of stuff, dynamics going on. But in that first couple of weeks, I remember I kept my same attitude I had during the whole show. I didn't have a lot to do with anyone socially on the show until I met Isabella. I shared a membership on I'll just call it a group, where we met once a week. And he and I had that in common. I played a little bit of basketball, but I never went to the dinners. I never went to the functions. I almost went to the reunion. I almost just went to the reunion.
I know,
and
you were only on FaceTime at the reunion.
but did you know the story? What happened? So I go, and they turn around, and they once again, it was another one of those like little slaps in my face over whether or not they were going to have a hotel room or whatever. And I thought, I know I'm going to go there and something's going to happen that I'm going to tell someone to fuck off or whatever, you know what I mean? And I didn't want it to be about that. I didn't want it to be about that. I'd rather take from it some of the things that I took from it that were good, some of the great lessons that I learned. There was a real fear in that first couple of weeks of Fontana and the producers. They were very unforgiving. So I know that people were afraid of them, and I always had an attitude, which was probably stupid on my part, which was very Neanderthal. Well, I'll knock you the fuck out. I was pretty hot-headed back then. So, like I'm not afraid of Tom Fontana. I'll take him and Yashimura and throw him in the fucking lake. Like, what are you talking about? So I came down to raw bones for me. Like, you're not going to hurt me, you little pussy. So, and that was not really probably helpful either, because it came across as being very obnoxious and confrontational on my part. I didn't know any better. I'm an Irish Catholic swinging in bars kid from Long Island who just gets a TV series, and you're thrust into prime time. I don't know these people, and I don't know, going to Juilliard, and I'm supposed to act this. I'm like, what? What time? You said 3:00. You weren't there at 3:00. I waited till 3:15. Fuck you! Don't ask me to come there ever again. And that was who I was, and I didn't forgive anyone for it. So when you got yourself in a situation with an entire cast and producers, I told him what time it was, thinking it was okay that I was still in the bar on Long Island telling my friends what time it was. I said, no, I'm not doing that. Fuck you. And they were like, no, you have to do that. And I went, no, I don't. Make me. And that was dumb. I shouldn't have handled it that way. I like I said, I'm not just blaming Tom, and I'm not blaming other producers on the show. I think we all probably should have communicated better. There was a real, to answer your question, there was a real fear. I think they wanted to instill us some kind of a fear of them in that first couple of episodes. And I wasn't afraid of them. I didn't care.
So you had the opportunity when you did the little test thing on toys. You got an opportunity to see and sort of have your mind blown about the way the camera was going to work, and how the camera was going to be actually within the ensemble cast during scenes, and that you never knew where the camera was going to look. And you might think your lines are done, and they might swing over to you just to see your face, not because you had a line. And a number of the actors, and I don't know about your background if you had done any theater, but a number said that it in some ways it was like theater, because you always have to be on in theater. So not only was the camera moving and you were always on, it was also a very fast-paced environment. We worked, that got to be done at 12 hours. It was very pressurized too. How did you handle that? And how did you have this camera moving around you and coming up into the middle of the scene and backing away? And, how different was that from other filmmaking?
That didn't bother me. Yeah, that didn't bother me. And I did come from the theater. But I will tell you this, always keep acting. AKA, always keep acting like Alec and
I was just thinking of that. Yeah,
always
be selling. Always be selling. Yeah.
Always be selling. ABC.
Or closing. Always be closing.
Always be closing. So here's the point. I'm trying to think of who it was, but if you're in real life and we stopped this conversation and you said, Daniel, whatever, we're not going to stop rolling. Remember, you've already instructed me about this. Okay. So I know I've been told ahead of time. Well, you've been told ahead of time, you may not be on camera when the person's talking. Normally, standard coverage is a master, then a close up on you, a close up on you, and a close up on me, or a mixed two shot that goes to a close up, something of that sort. Coverage. There was no real preordained standard coverage on this show. You may be doing something really interesting, which if you go, you want to see who the best actors on Homicide were? Watch how many times they're on reactions of people's while the other person's reading. If your reaction was better than their acting, or your reaction was more interesting than their acting. So I knew that I could turn around and I go, and do a little nuance, and they'd keep it on the show because it accentuated what he or she was saying
Right.
and sold that point better than maybe not that their acting wasn't good, but it just might it's a different choice. So I was always acting on that. And I was always the improvisational things that I learned to get away with on Homicide was you didn't want to change their line, you wanted to tag their line. So I remember there was a Belzer laughed his ass off. We were in a scene early on and he said, yeah, it's like a quarry. He said something about a quarry, like a stone quarry. And I went, you mean like Jerry Quarry, who was a boxer who fought Muhammad Ali back in the 1970s? It was like an obscure reference. And Belzer right away just looked up at me because he knew who Jerry Quarry was. Now, most of the viewing audience and the rest of the cast had no idea. There was another time where Levinson said, I need something to go out on the scene with. And I said, I got it. Turn the camera on. He goes, what is it? I said, just turn the camera on. And I went, farewell and adieu to you, oh Spanish ladies. And I knew everyone was going to know the song from Jaws. Farewell and adieu to you, ladies of Spain. And we all toasted our mugs and drank to end the episode. But there was fun things about that that humanized it and made you feel like you were part of. That was the hard part with the writing on the show. It was so strict at first. I kid you not. They would tell me, they would come to me and say things to me that were so obscure, like, hey, yeah, the order is we're going to have lunch and then we're going to talk at 3, not let's talk at 3, but have lunch first. And be like, what the fuck does that matter? And they were and I think that got people on edge too, that they had like we called them the script Nazis, like on us all the time, the continuity people,
Well,
just
the writers were on the set, which is
they were
unusual
on the
for
set
most
watching
TV
you
or
act.
films.
No,
The
no, 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 no,
writers
no,
were
no.
on
Wait
the
a second,
set.
wait a second, wait a second.
Yeah.
So this is where I get a bow from the cast members because it would be Fontana or Jimmy Yoshimura, and then the script supervisor. And you do the scene, you see Fontana go, and the script supervisor would walk over to you. So I'd walk right to Fontana. They all walk back to the script supervisor. I'd be like, fuck this chick. I walk right to Fontana and go, what's the problem? Oh, was there a problem? I go, don't act like there wasn't a problem. You just sent this minion over to give me some line. I'm in the middle of acting in a big scene, and you've got a direction. Give me the fucking direction. They hated that I was that guy. They hated that I wouldn't play the little, but I didn't want to, the poor girl's stuck between me and him, and she doesn't know what to say. She's a mouse.
Lee Bigelow was
Oh
her
my
name.
God, poor Lee. Poor Lee being thrust into the throes of me and Tom Fontana's emotional fray.
I do remember Clark because Clark had a very sort of casual delivery. I do remember Clark bumping with the writers more than once about feeling like his character would not say it that way, and he felt very deeply about that. So it was unusual. I mean, had you been on other shows or films? I'd never been on other shows or films where the writers were always on the set. Never. I'd never been on a show or a TV
no,
or a
that's
film.
sitcoms. Sitcoms you rehearse throughout the week and you keep changing. But let me tell you a great line. Andre used to say it. He would never say it out loud because he thought it was too obnoxious. But I'd say, bro, just point the camera. So you remember something. You're on the show. You're in season 3. You've been playing Beau Felton for 29, 32, 50 up, whatever. And they would say, you would see Clark's or Andre's face when they said this line. I think your character, and I'd go, and they'd go like this, oh God, don't say that to him. Because you've watched 2 episodes, they hired you, you're some kid out of fucking film school, and you're gonna tell me what my character would do I think your character, the worst possible thing you could say to me. And I'd go, bro, just point the camera over at me. Don't worry. Don't tell me what you think my character would do, because you don't know what my character would do. I've said this, and I've been in this confrontation 9 times now on the show with Melissa. What do you know about what the consistency of what my character would say is? What you well, do me a favor. So, what was his name? Do you know the name Lee Tamahara? Famous movie director,
Oh,
directed.
Yeah.
He directed The Edge with Alec. He directed Mulholland
Yeah.
Falls with me and
Yeah.
Nick Nolte. Anyway,
Yeah.
Lee comes up to me during a scene, and I've got this. I'm talking about the director of the FBI and with Bruce Dern. Um, who else was in the scene? Me, Bruce, and I can't remember who else it was, but another big actor. Anyway, he's telling me, he says, Daniel, and he's from Australia. And he says, Daniel, I believe your character, and he's telling me, and I went, so how do you want me to do it? He said, I just one time, mate, I'd love you to say, have the goddamn, really go after him. I said, okay, great. Ready? And action. Have the money at 3:00 or the director will be very upset. Cut! Daniel, I believe that your character, could you try doing the angry one, mate, where you scream it at him? I went, Lee, when a character yells and screams like that, he gives away his power. If you lean into somebody and say, and I want you to have it at 3:00 or you know what's going to happen, that guy's going to fucking kill you at 3:01. He doesn't care. He's more man. You have to challenge yourself how to drive in and photograph that guy and make him look more menacing, because trust me, the one that's really going to kill you is the one that doesn't get excited about it. So actually, I don't agree with your direction. I'm sorry. I don't want to, but just Daniel, try one more time. Give me one take. Just have me look at it in the room when I'm editing to see. And I went, okay, action. Have the money at 3:00. You know what's gonna happen. And so I did literally. Oh, it was Nick Nolte was the other actor. So I did and finally Nick starts laughing. He goes, "He's not going to give it to you, Lee. He's not giving it to you." And so when I would get these directions from again a kid that's excited and he's a new film school guy, their philosophy on Homicide was to hire guys that weren't that experienced
Yep.
because that were upcoming, interesting, talented, because they weren't locked into certain film and shooting rules.
Them
So
a
they
them and also the big feature film directors, but not
Mm-mm.
television directors.
Exactly. So when that guy came in and would tell me, I think your character, he was a death sentence for me, because I knew he didn't know shit about my character and he needed to trust me like I needed to trust he was going to photograph it. So I got my mind out of, to answer an earlier question, was it distracting to see the camera? I didn't pretend that I knew all the answers to using a camera like that because I'd never seen it before. But I trusted Wayne in that first year. And I thought too, if you look at Homicide season 1, 2, season 1 for sure, season 2 and 3, and then it really got dulled down because they started losing their Midwestern and Southern audiences. It was too jarring for them. And this is
Mm.
a fact that came in from friends of mine that ran the
Mm,
network,
mm.
who said, yeah, we got to move, we got to change it a little bit. It's a little too much. But that first year, holy crap, nothing was ever shot. So much so that another unknown, we're going to break it on your show,
Oh.
was Bochco. So Bochco comes out with Hill Street Blues after we come out, 1 year after. And so I go into the upfronts with Barry, and then so they want Big Mouth Baldwin to show up and do, the publicity as usual. And I go in there and I said, well, the ultimate compliment that anyone can pay you is by doing an impression of you. So for that, we say thank you to Stephen Bochco and Hill Street Blues for shooting their show and they had a guy rock. It was on a
Right, that's
tripod and
right.
they rocked it to make it look like
That's
Homicide
right.
because
Yeah.
we got
Yep.
all this great attention. And
Keep the head
Bochco went
loose and
nuts.
just move the head around, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Who the fuck does Daniel Baldwin think he is that Stephen Bochco would have to emulate? I went, so it's a coincidence that our show comes out, gets all this credit, and you start rocking your. Are you fucking kidding me? And I said that's what happened. And Barry was never going to say that. Fontana was never going to say that. But it was convenient for them to have me be the mouth when it came to stuff like that. And they did. They totally emulated us. And then they took off way beyond what we did popularity wise.
Mm.
But we definitely dulled down the camera work. I think even the material. That first 2 seasons, that first 2, man, that shit was raw, boy. It was
Mm.
raw. Like you were out there and you knew you were alone in TV. It wasn't done.
Mm.
And
Mm.
then And then not bad, but by season 5, it wasn't the same as the show was in season 1 and 2.
Well, there were a lot more. It was just the conversations between the detectives and how they reacted to things was just so much more, sort of felt more realistic and closer to the book in the early seasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they listen, you got to have an audience too. You got to have people, watch the show. And the fact of the matter is, back then I used to laugh because Alec he did his series, and I said, we used to have 12 to 15 million people to watch a show for it to be on to get reordered. You had to have 3, you in The Office and, the show you did, because the market had been so diluted 25 years later, 20 years later, that it's completely different what's necessary to be on a TV series now. Pretty soon you're going to find out most of those offices at NBC are going to be used for podcasts. Like they're just not going to be able to sustain themselves anymore. There's not enough people to watch TV like that.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you said about the directors that would come in and try to direct, and a number of the actors have commented that they were thrown into a situation that was completely different from anything they'd ever done before, and they had to learn after the first day. Maybe the first day they're going to try to impress their style on something, and then they get run over because the machine is in its slot and it's working and it's going to keep moving, and you just need to sort of hold on and trust the machine, right? And was a great a shot in the documentary that was shot during the Subway episode where the documentary director asks Andre about the directors, and Andre, like the cat and the canary, the cat with the canary, has this big smile on his face, and he says, "Well, they're just guests in our house for a week," and he smiles like good luck, right? Good luck trying to jump in. But it was interesting, and that's something we've talked about before. It would be interesting to go back and ask Tom and Barry why they chose people that would have probably the most difficulty in jumping into that situation, right? They hired feature film directors and young, unproven directors. So there was something, I don't know, that some kind of artistic energy they thought they would have.
We answered the question already. If you are, let me give okay. So Tom Landry, do you know that name?
Yeah, Tom Landry, the owner of the Cowboys? No?
The head coach of the Dallas Cowboys football team.
Yeah.
Okay. So Tom Landry takes Roger Staubach, the Naval Academy Heisman Trophy winner, and he drops him back 3 steps, and he has the center snap him the ball like a punter and what's called the shotgun.
Mm-hmm.
He shotguns him the ball, which allows Staubach to already not go hut and backup looking, but to be back there and already assess what's going on in a shotgun formation, which is obviously he's going to throw the ball. So he's letting the defense know we're going to throw the ball, most likely. We're probably not going to run it from here. But he's giving the quarterback the advantage of being up on his feet with the ball in his hand, already looking at receivers running and not having to take that time to be able to see it while he runs back 7 steps. He's back there already. You had to have somebody, and you had to have guys that were sold on the fact we're not handing the ball off anymore that much. We're going to throw it because there's more yards involved in throwing it. You had to have linemen that were sold on the fact that we're going to hinge and hand block. We're not going to fake like we're running the ball. We don't give a fuck about running it anymore. We're throwing it every time and telling them we're going to throw it by being in this formation. Same situation. You got to take a guy that comes up. If he's already done TV, he's also part of that machine. It has to be done this fast. It has to be planned. We're here on a tripod. We're here. We might do a little handheld. We're going to drive in on a dolly. And we're out. And he's used to that. You turn around and tell him we're going handheld, and we cut here. We break the fourth wall. We look into the camera. We shoot shit all the way over here while people are talking. And he goes, what? And he's too used to being one of those old linemen or one of those old wide receivers or one of those old players that doesn't understand this is innovative, this is different. You can't be married to that old way. And changing someone from an old way is harder than teaching someone who doesn't know. Because when you teach someone who doesn't know, it takes them a week. They figure it out. Next thing you know, all the actors are just doing it, and the directors are coming in. This is how we do it. They would bring those guys in. Remember something. They brought those new directors in. Also, unlike any other show I've ever done, you didn't bring the director who was going to direct the next episode in for 2 days to watch. They brought those directors in to watch us shooting the episodes. They brought director of episode 4 in during the last 3 days of episode 3 to watch what we did because it would be too much for them to try to figure out. They had to, oh, really? You do that? You never, you really do that? Yes. And by them observing, this is Tom. He's directing the next episode. Hey, Tom, how you doing? Get out of the fucking way. And he had to watch. That's why I think they did it. I swear. I think they brought him in there because they didn't know any better. They weren't going to be overwhelmed by what they'd already learned. And feature film guys, they're more likely to be able to swing with a handheld because of action sequences and stuff. So it won't be as foreign. But TV guys, they would have been lost if they were married. We had, what was his name? Bruce
Paltrow. In the first season.
We had Bruce come in. Now, he was a hard one because Bruce wasn't from that. He was a established TV director. I remember Bruce a few times going, wait a minute. And he looked at Wayne like, what? And he went, just trust me, man, come over here. We're going to come over here and do it. And Bruce wanted that standard coverage. And Bruce is a friend of mine too. And it took him a little bit to catch on. He kind of got into it because he was a very free-spirited, interesting guy. But you take somebody imagine Ned Beatty as a director trying to tell him how to direct with the way we shot it. You'd have been sunk. He'd have had a hard time.
Do you have favorite directors that you really liked working with? Because we had a number of directors that came back for 3, 4, 5, 6 episodes. Or do you have favorite episodes where you thought that they really got it nuts on with your character? Any of those favorite director, favorite episodes?
I'll tell you why I didn't really have much of a relationship with any of the directors except for Bruce and a little bit with Barry. I was a great fan of Levinson's, of Diner, and a bunch of other, movies that he had done. So I wanted to impress him and I wanted to interact with him. The other guys, a lot of them, I liked McNaughton. I liked a couple other guys. Like I said, I liked Bruce Paltrow as a human being. But I didn't get too involved with any of that. I'll tell you why. In my opinion, I was probably never going to see him again. And I was more immersed in Beau. I was much more immersed in Melissa and my relationships on the show. Like I had wished I could have done a couple episodes more with, Clark or with Polito or, it was always this fleeting, it was me and Melissa, we had partners. But and Andre, of course, who when he kept very quiet that he was sick, and now he's gone and I don't have him to talk to anymore, so slowly but surely, they're going to have to do the Deadpool. Who's next? Because we're down to just a few of us from that original cast. And I hope that it's not going to be for a long time that anybody else goes because now we're all, in our 50s and 60s. But we've lost quite a few members. And to answer your question, no, I didn't invest myself much in the directors because I didn't see any value in doing it. I would rather have kept the relationship very professional. I saw there was a lot of guys a lot of people on that show that were super chummy with the producers. They all went out all the time. They drank together. I never wanted to be a member of that because I would watch the deterioration of that on set. I'd watch so-and-so come in and be pissed off at this one because they didn't show up for dinner or because they said something wrong. I never had a personal problem with anyone on that show except for Tom. I would walk in and I'd see Melissa and I'd go, hey, what's going on? She'd go, hi. And I got involved in some shit. There was, I won't say the name, but there was somebody in her life that was physically, abusive. Me and Steven took this guy and slammed him up against the wall, my brother Steven, in an elevator one day because it got out that he had grabbed Melissa. She came after me. I came back to Baltimore from being in New York where I saw him. And she said, did you grab so-and-so? And did you? And I went, I did. And she went, what the fuck is wrong with you? And that's my personal life. And that has nothing to do with us here. And I went, I heard he grabbed you around the neck and put you up against a wall, and he wasn't going to do that to my friend Melissa Leo. It had nothing to do with Kay Howard. And she said, yeah, don't ever do that again. She didn't talk to me for weeks. But I was that guy. I was more, when something would happen with one of their families in real life, I contacted them outside the show. I cared about people that were on that show. one of the other really sad things for me, well, I mean, I don't want to overplay this, but um, was how little contact I ended up having after the show. Like I would have thought I was much closer to Belzer, who I spent time with his daughters and with his wife and with him,
Hmm.
and we traveled and we did. And he went on to SVU, and years later, I would text him or write him and wouldn't even return my message. Or so I kind of fell off of all of those people on that show. I didn't really talk to many of them, and recently rekindled somewhat with Kyle. Of course, I've always had a relationship with Isabella. We have a son together. So she and I have always remained friends and close, but I don't talk to the ones that are left. Kyle, I talk to Kyle.
Well, it's interesting you talk about Melissa. I literally think from the first frames of the first show where the camera comes in and it comes across, Melissa picks up the phone, or no, it's a Kyle comes in and says, "Is this the homicide unit?" And Melissa says, uh, what is it?
We work for
We
God.
work for God, right? She says we work for God, and you guys, there's something about your I think unlike, well, I guess some of the other partners had their desks across from each other, but your proximity to each other, there was some kind of immediate, you knew immediately the comfort and the support between you and Melissa, between your two characters, as soon as the show started. And there's so much, you mentioned the scene where she's worried about her relationship, and do you think she's attractive and that kind of thing. So, and then there's the other storyline when you're breaking up with your wife, and Kay is covering for you, and then she goes out and buys Christmas presents so you can take to the kids.
Oh yeah,
There's a really beautiful, close relationship that I think came across in the very first frames of the show. And so it's interesting because I didn't know that you guys knew each other before and that you were friends. And I think that really worked for the characters. And also because, like they did with everybody else, the characters often that were partnered together were 180-degree opposites. So here's Kay with like no red on the board, like Miss like perfect organization and all that. And you sort of like going with the flow, the guy that just like keeps moving through and getting this stuff done. It just really worked. The chemistry between you guys was great. It's like I said in a 5-minute
yeah.
question.
I think the pairings um, were very unique and interesting too. I used to look at too when I would they. This is another one that got me in a lot of trouble. Um, in the very beginning, like I'd say, like the first literally like 3 or 4 episodes, I watched them when they were on TV, and then I stopped watching. And so that was another one that got everyone so mad. Fontana said, "You don't watch the show?" And I went, "No." And he said, "Why would you not watch the show? You're on primetime television series. This is your job." And I went, "Tom, you can't go backwards. Like what job? Tell me what job you do when you're a fireman that you get to go back and watch the videotape of what you did in the fire, or what you did at the police department, or the call, or the traffic stop, or your episode that you did where you were teaching a classroom." I said, All it does is make me want to falsely do things. It's like watching dailies. I'm a movie director. I've directed a lot of films that have won a lot of awards, and
Mm-hmm.
that in that situation, I have to watch the dailies, and I have to watch what's going on over and over and over again in order to cut the best film that tells the message that I'm trying to tell. But as an actor, what happens is they ask you on the movie, "Do you want to watch dailies?" And I always say no, because you're going to try to falsely put something in a scene that you feel that you didn't get in the scene before, and you're like, "Oh, I should have done this." Now you're going to do something that you normally wouldn't have done. I don't want to do that. That's not life. Life happens, it comes at you. Life is about reacting. It's not about acting. How much of what you're going to do the rest of the day do you have planned? Maybe where you're going to go, maybe what time you're going to go there, but not what you're going to do and what you're going to say. So, I like to see I'll never forget, it was Faye Dunaway and I did a scene years ago in a movie, and she turned around, and it was about 30 years ago, and she came out, and I thought for sure it said in the text, she says angrily, "Have them there," and blah blah blah. And so we get to the part, and she goes, "Well, my dear, have them there," and I went, "Oh my God, no." She didn't give me anything like what was actually written in the script that she was going. She raises her voice, she slams the candelabra down. She says she didn't do any of that. And I thought, now everything that I had, Meryl Streep planned, like, in perfect order, I was going to then get in her face and I was going to use my left hand and I was going to touch her cheek. I was going to push her back. I was going
Wow.
all that, none of that worked because I look like an asshole doing all that because she didn't give me what was written there. So really what happens is that if I'm in the scene with her, that I'm acting with her, reacting off of what she gives me and trying to do in the moment what's appropriate to do. Those types of things I had with Melissa were magic. They were magical. I mean, she looked at me, she made that long eye contact with me. She gave me a chance to say what I wanted to say because I would wait till it was over and then I would do the tag and I'd go after her and we'd have fun and she'd start cracking up and the take was unusable because I made her laugh and she'd go, "Don't say that shit to me. You're going to make me laugh." And I'd be like, "I know, I was trying to make you laugh." We got to spar, It's
Yeah.
sparring. Andre and I were masters at that. He and I would
Yes.
go,
That
we
was
played
great
little word.
chemistry too. Yeah.
Oh my God. We and I used to play, do you know the song Justify My Love,
Yeah. Madonna,
from
yeah.
Madonna? And so there's the thing when she goes, yearning, burning. So one day I'm singing that song and Andre goes, "What are you singing?" I go, "It's Justify My Love." So I play the song for him. He starts laughing. And we would play this game where we had to end it with earning and we'd keep it going. So I'd say yearning and he'd go burning. And I'd say returning and he'd say discerning. We'd go back and forth until you couldn't think of another word. And then you'd have to admit that you lost by saying, "Justify My Love." So we played this on set all the day. One day, I think it's Ned and Polito or something, and me and Andre and Belzer are all around this desk. And so I turn around and I go, yearning. And we're rolling on a scene. And he goes, burning. And I said, returning. And he says, discerning. And he says, turning. And finally I turn around, look at him, and I go, Charles Durning. I said, Charles Durning. And Andre just goes, and he starts laughing, and everyone looks at him during the scene, and he goes, "Did you just fucking say Charles Durning?" And I went, "I did." And he goes, "Justify My Love, man. That shit's hot." You go because we had taken it as many earnings as we could. We just kept doing it to kill time because we weren't on camera. I said
Amazing.
Charles Durning, and that motherfucker fell over laughing. It was funny.
He was a funny guy too. He's so
Oh,
serious on the show and as soon as the camera went off, he'd be doing something silly. He just
oh,
was
we
a
did.
funny
We
guy.
had so much fun. Just and we would mess with people. Like, we were so critical. They'd bring a guest star in, and we go, "Pff, he's hamburger. He's done. This guy's not even gonna appear in the episode. This guy, wait till I get my hands on." I go, "You got a scene with this guy?" He goes, "I'm gonna kill this guy." Like, we'd rate him, like, could he hang with us, or we were just gonna crush him. And poor guy would come in and go, "Oh, hey, the body was found at 3:00 times." He go, "Yeah, thanks." Like, he'd just blow him off because he knew the guy was, like, way too eager. Oh, yeah, I used to listen to his ratings of people. It was great.
Mm. So
Great
sorry to
design.
lose him. But that was a
Yeah,
horrible,
yeah, he
horrible
kept that
shock.
very quiet. I guess he'd been
Mm,
sick for a while.
gosh.
It's very sad.
Mm.
Have you looked at any of the Peacock episodes because they remastered it, you
Yeah, I
know?
watched with my wife. We watched a few episodes. It's weird, people say to me, I call it master watching. When I watch all alone, I watch myself on TV. Um, so I it's hard to go back, it's hard for me to go back. And Homicide for me was it was a mixed bag, it really was. I look at I probably could have been on the show and ran for all, 8 years or 9 years or however many years it went. But I didn't, and I think it wasn't my calling to be on that show because I felt so, um, uh, restricted. There was very specific what they wanted. I think I delivered, as best I could what they wanted. But I look at who I am as a human being now. I mean, I'm married. I have a baby. I have an opportunity to be a really good Christian husband now, and those are things that I didn't do as well. As a human being and as a Christian man in my life, back at that time, and for years after that, it took me to evolve, but be in the relationship with God and with my wife that I'm in now. So I probably would have been different on the show if I was Clark's or Giardello, on the show now as the older shift commander. I'd have been a different guy than I was as Beau Felton. But I don't go back and watch much of the things that I've ever done. Um, it's weird, my kids. It's funny. I've done 100 and almost 60 movies in my career now. And I've done 5 TV series and, like lots of stuff. My kids don't know any of my work. My kids don't watch my work. I don't go back and watch work. I want to make new stuff. I make
Yeah.
documentaries now and
Yes. A
I
couple
do a
award-winning
podcast.
documentaries.
Yeah, I've been very
Yeah.
fortunate. Who knew I had any ability to make a documentary, but that's gone all right.
And those were called Promise to PJ and The Wisdom to Know the Difference. Those got a lot of attention.
My Promise to PJ was a great film. If you have a chance to see it on Tubi or whatever, it's out there. It's about my path to sobriety with a young kid whose mother was my brother Alex's first girlfriend in junior high school, and I took him in and out of rehab for 4 different times, and he ended up dying. But it's really interesting the promise that I made to him. You have to go back and we'll talk about that on the next show.
Okay.
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 Yeah.
Cool.
Well, this has
Brilliant.
been great. Go
yeah,
ahead.
it's
Go,
been
Chris.
fantastic. Thank you, Daniel. No, I was going to say, I did have one random question if you've got time.
Come on,
for
man. We're going to close it on a big one.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
do you have
big
any
one.
like food or drink memories of Baltimore? What were you?
I
Where were you
do.
hanging out?
I do. I'm going to tell you
Yeah.
that my wife and I almost went to the reunion, and I remember Sabatino's. Sabatino's
Yes.
was a little Italian place, and they had their food there was so good, but they had a salad called a bookmaker salad that I looked up, and they still have it. These big shrimp, and it was like this amazing salad they made, and I would go there and knock out a bookmaker salad every time I went, and I loved that place,
They are
Sabatino's.
famous
That
for
was my
that.
favorite.
Yep.
Yeah, that was
Really
my
great.
favorite
The
place.
dressing
Yeah.
on it. Yeah. Sabbies. We used to call it Sabbies.
And the other thing I will tell you that no one in the world except for people, Baltimore, don't say the T, Baltimoreans, um, will tell you is that a real crab cake, a Baltimore crab cake, a Chesapeake Bay crab cake, has chunks of crab in it the size of your thumb. I mean, big chunks of crab. When they give you these crab cakes and they say, oh, East Coast, Baltimore, bullshit. They're not. You have to go there to get a lump crab cake to see the big pieces of crab sticking out of this ball, this big fat ball that like it's nowhere else in the world. No one makes it like they make it there. It's the only place that has that herb bread crab taste with chunks of crab in it. Like a piece like what you would normally think a piece of lobster chunk, like a chunk of
Yes.
lobster this big. That's how big it is. That's a Baltimore crab cake.
It's so true. 'Cause when I lived in LA, there was a place called the Maryland Crab House. It was like, no.
It's a
It
joke.
was just not.
It's a joke. It's the stuff out of a can.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Chris wants to try to make crab cakes in London. I said,
Yeah, good luck.
good luck finding some. There ain't going to be no canned crab that's going to come close to that.
And the funny thing is, if you really truly are a connoisseur of food, one time somewhere you're in Jersey, you're in Atlanta, you're somewhere near it. I would ask you honestly, just fly into like a restaurant in Fells Point in that Inner Harbor area that has, and ask someone who has a real Maryland crab cake, and go have one, and you'll understand that you've never had one before until you have one there. You just never have.
Oh, that's great.
that
I love that. Sabatino's
Yeah.
and the best crab cakes. That's great.
There you go. That's it, guys.
Thank you, Daniel. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been
Yes,
awesome.
Yes,
thanks
and
for
please
spending the
don't
time.
hesitate. Here's what I'm gonna promise. I'm gonna look at season 1. I'm gonna accumulate my 3 best stories I can tell, and I'll come back
Wow.
on the show.
Thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate that.
That'd
Thank
be
you.
great. Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Wow, so that was Daniel Baldwin. What an episode. I personally really enjoyed sort of hearing, well, a lot of things in there, but I really enjoyed listening about how he got started in acting and how his dad bought this Super 8
That was
camera and
great.
how he and young Alec were making these films together. I mean, I would love to see those films one day.
Wouldn't you? I wonder if they have them tucked away anywhere.
Yeah, wouldn't that be cool?
Did he say they made hour long, and did he say they
Yeah,
made
yeah.
100? He said hour long, which blew me away because film,
Yes.
even though that was, many years ago, was still not cheap.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. No, and it isn't cheap now either. But
Mhm.
for those who don't know, so Super 8 is just it was the consumer format for film back in the day, if we put it that way. So obviously it's half the size of 16 millimeter, and you could buy those cameras quite easily. They weren't obviously cheap, but they were quite common back then. And then obviously they were slowly replaced by the camcorder in the sort of late 70s, early 80s with videotape, and then obviously then we went into mini DV and now obviously smartphones. But it's such an amazing format. So it has a nice sort of well, the color film stock has a nice sort of warm feel to it. And if you ever Google just Super 8 videos, you'll sort of see what we mean. It kind of has this nostalgic feel to it. Can be a little bit soft because of the small size of the film, so it's not as sharp looking as like 16 or 35, but it's a great little format. So Susan, what do you think this sort of stood out for you? I mean, there's so many different things we could talk about with this interview.
Well, also before your time,
Mm.
Chris, was 8 millimeter
Oh, was it? Okay.
before
Yep.
Super 8.
And it was even a 9.5 millimeter as well, if I get really
Is
nerdy
there
about it.
really?
Yeah, it wasn't very popular, but there was a 9.5
Wow.
millimeter.
But yeah, the Kodachrome,
Mm,
version of Super 8 and the 8 millimeter film
mm,
was really pretty stuff.
yeah, it is.
I have a hand cranked 8 millimeter camera in there that were what was my parents, and then things bumped up to Super 8, and we actually had, and I think I have in my basement, a projector that had a switch, and it racked over from 8 millimeter to Super 8. And I guess the difference was, like with Super 16, I'd have to go look. Did the 8 millimeter have perfs on both sides, and the Super 8 only had it on one side, and so then
Yeah, I
could make
guess
the
so, yeah.
frame bigger?
Yeah,
Maybe
yeah.
it's something to explore for our next episode.
Definitely, and I can imagine there were marketing gimmicks, hence why 9.5 millimeter, I guess, back in the day, is like, "Oh, you can get an extra
9.5.
millimeter or half a millimeter," you
Wow.
know?
Wow, now that'd be a camera to find somewhere.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
But yeah, I thought the same thing when I heard that story. I thought, "Wow, what a great, like, movie that would make if you could get those films and cut them together."
Mm.
Um,
Yeah,
that
yeah,
that would
like
be precious to see
yeah.
them.
You're picturing young Alec Baldwin sitting in his dad's car while sitting on, I think it was phone books or
A
something to
phone
bring him
book,
up.
right? And then the fact that they had the driving scene, pushed it into the street, and they left it in the street because it was too heavy to push back up the driveway. I love it's like Boots's story, being handed a
Mm,
camera, and then some people get handed a camera and, go really interesting places with it.
mm.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a ton of stuff, stuck out to me. A lot of it because, there were many things that happened that I did not know about, even though I was on the show and on the set. And who knows, maybe I heard, maybe I heard about some of this back then and I just forgot. But I mean, the story that they were going to bring Alec on
Mm,
and
yeah.
have the brothers together on the show, and then Alec declined because the scenes that were written for him were with Andre. Being the point seemed to be, I'd like to be there to act with my brother. So that was a
Mm.
story I hadn't heard before. That was interesting. I also really liked, he talked a lot about process, about acting process, the directing process, how he reacted to directors, how he learned to direct by watching directors. And I loved when he said the best directing lesson he ever had was with Barry. And him and the other actors wanting to do something different, and instead of telling them what to do, Barry would say, "Well, what did you wanna do? And how about what do you wanna do here?" And so that, Danny described it as bringing him to like you can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. But if you and he described it as having arrived there, with his own creative impulses and thoughts, but it was what Barry wanted him to do, but without telling him what to do. He got the actors to think about it, and then it eventually got to what, Barry wanted from them directing wise, but that the actors had input, and it was from, I think Danny even said something like, but it was from inside. It was from interior, because he arrived at it himself. I thought that was really interesting. And also some of the ways that they ramped each other up before scenes, when he talked about,
Yeah.
he and Robin, who he knew before the show and knew that Robin could be confrontational, that they ramped each other up. I think it sounded like he didn't expect Robin to come at him the way he did in the first take, and went a little crazy on him. And then I think he said Robin asked him to come out to dinner that night, and Danny's like, "No, I do not want to have dinner with you. I want to keep that anger and that confrontational relationship that we built in the scene prior, that day."
Mm.
So I thought that was interesting. And
And
also
he also mentioned that scene with Clark, didn't he, in the
Yes.
bathroom? Yeah, so that's such a brilliant scene, that scene where they kind of had
Mhm.
that fight in the bathroom, yeah. And he kind of really amped him up off camera, yeah.
Yeah, that little toss away comment he said he made to Clark, where he said, "Don't let me get ahead of you," or don't what I don't know how he put it, but it was sort of like putting Clark down, like, "Bring your game, like, just remember to bring your
Yeah, yeah,
game."
yeah,
Um,
yeah. And
and,
I hope
but
we
that
get to hear Clark's side of that story one day, but
Yes, Clark, we'd love to hear your side of the story. Um,
hint, hint, hint.
just it's so many things, and
Mm.
also in relation to that, the Robin Williams episode, to Bop Gun, where Danny expresses, something that seems very cold in the midst of this horrible tragedy for Robin Williams' character, that his wife was murdered, and the homicide detective sitting around joking about how much, and Danny saying, or Beau Felton's character, his character, Beau Felton, saying that they were really going to rack up some overtime on this one, and that he described the way that homicide detectives and any kind of police or people that face these kind of horrible situations as oil on the wing, like on a duck or a bird, mostly on a duck because it's a waterfowl, right? And that you have to have that protective coating, and that you have to let things slide off of you, or you would be, mentally impaired if you're absorbing all these things. And they obviously absorb it, but to be able to sort of slough it off with humor and,
Yeah, yeah.
all those kinds of things. I'm finishing up reading a book about the French Resistance women at Ravensbrück, a concentration camp.
Ooh, wow.
And one of the women wrote, they never performed it there. It wasn't one of the concentration camps where they had orchestras and stuff like that. Um, and it was never performed, but she wrote it and handed it out, like, it by piece to people so they could sort of enjoy it. And it had this very black humor. It had music in it. And it did get performed later, like in the early 2000s, but people that were there were very afraid that the black humor would be taken the wrong way, that, "Oh, we didn't laugh our way through Ravensbrück. This was a way that we were able to deal with the horror and the trauma." And they didn't want people to misunderstand that. And I think that was a really interesting explanation that Danny gave about how homicide detectives have to have that protective coating.
Mm. Yeah,
That was
makes
a
a lot of
really
sense.
long explanation, sorry.
That makes sense, that makes sense. Just to change the tone slightly,
Yes.
the one thing that this interview has done to me is changed the song Madonna, "Justify My Love." Because now every time I hear that song, I think of Charles Durning, so thank you, Daniel, for that.
That's so funny, and there's some little things like that, like, gosh, I
Mm,
wish I, like, remembered seeing that happen at the time. And there were certainly times when people broke, the actors broke each other up for
mm,
sure.
mm.
But I would have loved to have seen that joking continue into the scene where people didn't know what they were talking about.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, that was
it's brilliant.
really interesting. I also thought some things, and we talked about this earlier about, there's 2 sides to every story. I would love to hear, this idea, that they were gonna push his storyline, back into alcoholism because of all the things his character was going through, and Danny was very resistant of that because he wanted his character to evolve, and saying, "Don't go I don't wanna go back. I wanna, evolve my character." I thought that was interesting, and then, I said, If you're gonna make me don't make me go back, just kill me off." Like, well, that's what they did,
Yeah.
eventually, which is interesting, his idea that, like, if you're not gonna teach me and I'm not gonna have a character evolution. um, I also thought that the anecdote about Wilford Brimley was
Oh,
pretty
yes.
funny.
Yes, yes, 'cause I remember you described he'd been quite difficult on set, so it
He was a
was,
cranky
yeah.
old dude, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes the actors are put in uncomfortable situations, and Wilford Brimley played that whole episode from bed, right?
Mm.
Because, the episode was about assisted suicide. And then the whole confrontation with Danny and Clark we mentioned earlier, the fight in the bathroom was in that episode, and it was about whether or not Danny was interfering with the or, whether Beau Felton was interfering with with Meldrick Lewis's investigation of whether or not that was assisted suicide, which in Baltimore still would have been murder, um, or if it was accidental, or if he died, naturally. But so Wilford Brimley plays the whole episode in bed and not, I guess, not happy about that. But yeah, he was a pretty grumpy. And it's interesting, that Danny says he took the time and the energy to go over there and say, "Look, man, like, you know, don't do that. Like, you're a visitor, as everyone else was that came in on the show, directors, guest stars, to this, to his world." Um, and just asked him, to be a little nicer so that things would go a little smoother the next day.
Mm.
I thought that was interesting. I
Yeah,
don't
that's
remember
good of
knowing
yeah.
I don't remember knowing that, or actually,
Mm,
I don't
mm.
remember thinking that he was that he was nicer
He was a little bit less cranky the
on
next day.
subsequent days, but he
Oh,
may have just been
yeah, yeah.
quieter, I don't really remember
Mm,
that.
mm.
And the story about Robin Williams and the gun, and we talked about that idea of a detective, a cop, like, you're not gonna hand your gun over to somebody, um, which is interesting, and Danny sort of prodding Kyle, like, "Don't do that. I don't care what the script says, don't do that." Um, I thought that was good. I did wanna give props to Lee Bigelow, because he made a comment about the girl, quote, unquote, "script supervisor," being a mouse. Well, Lee was not a mouse. Lee was not hi, Lee, I know you're listening. You are not a mouse, and you were not a mouse then. I think he meant it in the context of Tom or whoever was on the set, um, going to the script supervisor to tell Lee to talk to the actors as opposed to just going directly to them, and that she ends up in the middle of it. But yeah, Lee was not a mouse. Hi, Lee, we love you. Hopefully, we'll have you on too.
Yeah,
Gosh.
that'd be
Oh,
good.
yeah, that shit that talk about a real specific skill set. Like, script supervising, you would not understand it until you look at the book and see what they're doing on every line, in every scene, on every page, how they're noting what is different or not different from what is in the script, which way people are looking. Now, obviously, continuity wasn't as big a deal with us, but people have to be looking the correct direction when you flip the camera around. People, if you're smoking a cigarette, is it in your mouth when we turn around, or is your hand on the table when the cigarette should be in your mouth? All those things they are constantly noting, throughout the scenes and throughout the day, and looking at the script at the same time. So that is a real interesting specialized skill for sure. Um, let's see. I like 22. He got a little nostalgic and said that, he wished, so many of his scenes were really exclusively with Melissa, and he had, a number with Andre because that was a real spark making, relationship between the two of them, but that he wished he'd done more scenes with Clark and with John Polito, and he didn't get a chance to because that just wasn't that those weren't the relationships that were crossing over much in the scripts. And I thought it was really sweet when he talked about his relationship with Melissa and that they'd been friends, and that they had a chance to talk about working through scenes, and how they're and how that relationship affected their relationship, in their characters' relationship. I thought that was really cool. I'm saying a lot, sorry.
No, sorry.
And there was just, numbers of things he talked about. I thought the directing and acting process things he mentioned. One of the things he talked about was life is about reacting, not acting.
Yeah.
And so he hesitated to look too far ahead in scripts. If we were shooting or not shooting chronologically, he wanted to learn what was happening at the
As the
time, so he
character
could
was,
have
yeah.
he could
Yeah.
have the correct reactions to it. So he's looking
Mm.
at things very closely to when we're shooting things.
Mm.
I thought that was interesting. And he illustrated it by talking about the scene with Faye Dunaway, where he had, when he was a young actor, he had read the script, and he was all prepared because in the script she was supposed to yell at him and get in his face and be very confrontational. And when she got to the scene, obviously she decided that she didn't want to do that, or she wasn't going to play it that way. And so he's left there.
Yeah.
He's juggling all
Hanging.
these things he was ready to do, which were completely nil, would have zero meaning for him to do. And I think that was a good illustration of learning how to be, don't prepare, but, prepare so that you know what's happening, but don't prepare so much that you're flummoxed if things go differently when the scene is running and the characters have a different reaction to things, or are staying more true to what they think the character should be doing, and then stay in the scene and be reacting in the moment. And I know a lot of that people think of as method acting. Now, I don't think Danny's a method actor, but the idea of living in the moment, like, right, you are actually living it as we're shooting it, which makes for, I think, really natural reactions. And I loved his talking about the scene where with the director, and do you remember which one he was talking about? He was an Australian or British director.
Mulholland Falls.
Oh, Mulholland Falls. Oh, sure.
Yeah, with Nick
Sure.
Nolte.
And
That's it. That's the film.
And the director wanting him to get in the other character's face, and Danny explaining, look, the scarier, more intimidating thing is the guy saying, you better have that here at 3:00 or I'm going to kill you or you're dead. Not screaming it, and I love the way he said, and that guy, he doesn't care. He has no feeling. When he says it to you that way, it means you are dead. Doesn't matter. 3:01, you're dead. And the director kept asking him over and over again, oh, please just do it one more time. Just, give me a little bit, do it. One's angry. And he kept doing it the same way because he really felt like that character, his most intimidating way of communicating is to talk very, get small.
Yeah.
Talk very
And that is more
softly.
intimidating a lot of the time. The most intimidating people I've ever met, sometimes you just get in your face, but then bring it down a notch, It's like
really good. Really good. And
yes, that's Mulholland Falls is the film. Lee Tamahori is the director, and he's actually from New Zealand, not Australia. So any New Zealanders out there, we apologize.
Sorry.
There's a big
I'm
difference
sure your
between New Zealand and Australia.
Not that I would know, because I get Australian, New Zealand, and South Africa. I used to mix up with Australian, but I don't anymore.
Well, it's funny in America. I always get mistaken for being Australian. And
that's
and
weird
once
because you do not have an Australian accent.
no, exactly. It is hilarious. Once I was walking past one of the many Scientology centers in Los Angeles, and this lady was trying to recruit strangers, and she went up to me and said, "Oh, you're Australian." And I'm like, "No, I'm not Australian." So you've really done well there.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for understanding the
Oh, dear.
world.
So,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
yeah.
definitely do not sound Australian. Yeah. And I also back to Melissa,
Mm,
he made a
mm.
couple comments that he loved that they got to spar and that
Yes.
some of those moments with Melissa were magic. I just thought that was such a nice thing to say,
Mm, mm.
and that you could tell that's the one thing you could tell, even though he was unceremoniously, l you know, kicked off the show for I'm sure reasons that Tom and Barry had and for whatever. And he said that, he knew he had issues then and he had addiction issues then and he had multiple things going on. Nevertheless, he spoke so highly of the show and so kindly about it and had really good memories of it and good things to say about it. Even though he was kicked off the show. And the fact that he said he wished he had stayed longer and that maybe now that he's older and more experienced, if he'd had that a little bit more of that when he was younger, and maybe if everybody had a little bit more of that when we were all younger, um, that he might have been able to have a longer tenure on the show.
Mm, mm.
But I thought his sort of tenderness in talking about that was really nice. And yeah, do you wanna talk and since you asked the food questions, why don't you talk about that? Because
Well,
I
yeah.
loved that he
Yeah.
what he brought up,
Well, yeah, the
as
bookmaker
far as and
salad, which
remembering it
mm.
30 years later.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously it's legendary. I mean, I Googled it afterwards and I have found a recipe to try and imitate it at home, but I hope to return to Baltimore to try the real thing. But it sounds fantastic, and it's from that restaurant Sabatini's, and I think we were just saying off air Sabatino's,
Sabatino's.
sorry, Sabatino's from the restaurant Sabatino's. I think we were saying off air that Sabatino's might well have been a location in an episode of Homicide.
Yeah,
Which one was that? Do you remember?
yeah, well, it was the one, if I'm remembering correctly, where the young man who actually was played by Daryl Wharton Rigby, Daryl Wharton at the time, um who became a writer on the show, was a PA and a PA with the writers, and then became a full-time writer on the show. He is told by, was it his cousin, to kill someone, and he just does it. And, Ned Beatty wanted to know why he paid he's leaving the
Yeah.
restaurant, and he buys a mint on the way out.
That's it, yeah.
And Ned says, like, "Why did you pay for the mint?" And he said, "'Cause I'm not a thief."
Yeah.
But I think the guy he murders, it was face down in the salad, and I wondered if it was the bookmaker salad from Sabatino's.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
Um,
to rewatch that episode to confirm that now, but yeah, I think you might be right. It'd be an interesting
yeah,
nod, because obviously the writers, as Tom once said, that, they're all based in Baltimore, so it's a nice Baltimorean touch, isn't it, if that is the
right,
case, If
and
you're gonna
trying to get
die on
real
a
deep on
salad, it's
that.
gotta be the best salad in Baltimore, isn't
Right, exactly, go there. Right. And a big so what's special about it too is they bring
Mm.
and, they do this other places too, but back in the day, maybe it wasn't as as normal an occurrence, but they bring the big bowl and they mix it at the table, with the oil and vinegar and the Parmesan and the homemade croutons and all that great stuff at the table. And I think that was called the bookmaker salad because the bookies would go in there at lunch and they wanted something quick. I think that's
Oh,
I think that's the
yeah.
backstory. Anybody in
Okay.
Baltimore would be able to correct me on that, but I think that's that's why it was called the bookmaker salad.
Yeah, we were saying off air, we're definitely gonna have to do potentially the kind of the places the cast and crew went to eat on
Mhm.
Homicide. Maybe that was either an episode or an article, but there's
Yeah, let's
something
do
in that now.
the culinary
Yeah.
tour, based on the Homicide cast and crew.
Yeah, maybe we should get, Stanley Tucci in because he was the guy who was doing episodes about going around Italy, so we need, like, Stanley Tucci to do a tour of the restaurants of Baltimore. There we go.
That's funny.
Anybody knows Stanley Tucci on air? Hit us
No,
up.
we'll get our own we'll get Danny to come back and do it.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah,
Um,
God, that would be
but he
fun, wouldn't
also
it?
mentioned the crab
Mm,
cakes, and which is
yeah.
one thing that Marylanders will say. It doesn't matter where you go in the world. If they say it's a Maryland crab cake, it ain't a Maryland crab cake. And that he said, you've got to come here.
Yeah.
If you're here, ask any local, where's the best place to get a crab cake? And of course, you get that beautiful, l- you know, blue crab. First of all, Chesapeake Bay blue crab and the lump crab, not the stringy weird, I don't even know where that crab comes from and what kind of crabs it is that you get in the jar or the can or whatever, but the beautiful big lumps. And also, Maryland is known for the fact that they do not put a bunch of filler in it, and that we're known for the fact that it is a crab cake and it is some big ass chunks of crab and not a whole lot of other junk holding it together. Just a little bit of something, a little bit of breadcrumbs and egg maybe to hold it together. And some Old Bay seasoning.
Yes.
But the crab is very luscious and sweet and not chewy like lobster. Not a big lobster fan. If you've never had a Maryland crab cake, you got to come here to get it. I thought that was the best commercial ever. Danny Baldwin on Maryland crab cakes. Pick that up. Tourism industry. Go pick that up.
Yeah. And sponsor us on the way.
Yeah. I mean, I remember being someplace, it might have been like San Francisco, and saying they had Maryland crab cakes, on the menu. And I look at it and it says with a Dijon mustard sauce. And I just started laughing. It's like, we do not put Dijon mustard sauce on our crab cakes, people. No, so don't call it a Maryland crab cake. Yeah. Funny.
Oh, hilarious. Cool. Well, that's certainly me covered. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, it was just really terrific fun, and his energy and enthusiasm, which you marked at the beginning, you mentioned at the beginning, was really terrific, and he did say that what did he say? He was going to watch some more episodes and come back with 3 more really good stories, and he wants to come back on.
That'd be
so
good.
We're going to dog him a little and hopefully have him back again this year.
And we should definitely talk to him about the Homicide the movie, because he's in it at the end. John Polito and everybody, and it's such a great send off for the show and for his character and stuff. And be interesting to see if he has any interesting memories from that experience as well. But I'll have to see. But no, it'd be great to get Daniel back on. But thank you so much, Daniel, for being on the show. And that was a really enjoyable interview. And I look forward to doing it again in the near future.
Yeah, and Danny, give Clark a call.
Yes, please do. Everybody give Clark a call.
Everybody.
There's just light up his one cell phone that doesn't take
his flip phone. Light up his flip phone, people.
Yes, let's light that up.
We love you, Clark. You would have a great time, please.
Oh, it'd be good to get him on, but we'll see. We're trying.
He's the remaining one, right? He's the last OG. He's right? He's the only one.
He is. He's a busy man because he's on a show called Daredevil at the moment. And he's one of the main characters in that. So I know he is a busy man currently. Doing
maybe we'll just go live one day and just call him.
I think just go to Los Angeles and doorstep him. That's what we'll do. Well, everybody, thank you so much for listening. And I hope you enjoyed that. And we will catch you on the next episode. Take care.